Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Elaine Sanders, the Adult Programming Coordinator for the Mark Twain Library. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening for one of our Black History Month programs in which our panel of experts will explore the positive impact that urban farming has on communities. So tonight our program is a webinar. So the audience is muted. However, we do want you to know that we'd love to hear from you. We want your questions. So please feel free to put your questions at any time into the Q&A function. And that's down at the bottom of your screen. There's a button marked Q&A. So please go ahead and put those questions in there. We are recording tonight's program. So if you have a friend who couldn't make it, they're going to be able to check it out on the library's YouTube channel. It usually takes us about a week to get that up there. And I also now want to turn things over to Dr. Sharon Young. She's a Reading resident and associate professor for the Department of Social Work at Western Connecticut State University. Sharon generously organized our panel tonight and will moderate the discussion. So many thanks for being with us tonight, Sharon.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Unfortunately, Molly Bassick-Smith, who was a nutritionist, couldn't make it tonight. She had an emergency she had to tend to, but we have three fantastic panelists. And I want to thank them so much for taking the time to share their expertise with us. I want to introduce first Herb Virgo, who is the executive director of the Keeney Park Sustainability Project. He holds a BA in sociology-based human relations from Connecticut College and has 17 years of experience working with children and families. As the executive director of KPSP, Herb has directed the operation to support the development and sustainability of community-based food systems, including farmers markets, community gardens, school-based gardening, agricultural products, and home gardens. Thank you, Herb. Robert Peck is also with us. He is the Youth Leadership Program Manager at Green Village Initiative in Bridgeport and a graduate of Western Connecticut State University, which is very happy for me to hear that. He got into urban farming when leading an AmeriCorps group throughout the South. While in Tallahassee, he was introduced to urban farming, and everything around it reminded him so much of his hometown of Bridgeport. Learning about the land inspires Robert to become a grower, and he now calls himself a hood farmer. Lauren Little is an urban farmer, educator, and activist. She has worked in education for over 16 years, and her passion is to share knowledge. In 2013, as a collaborative effort, Lauren developed an urban agriculture program and curriculum called Gaia's Guides, which uses characters, original stories, jingles, and dances to encourage environmental stewardship. In her work as an urban farmer, she managed 60 school farm plots, taught over 5,500 students how to grow food, and fed more than 100 families throughout the greater Hartford area. So welcome, everybody. So we have a lot of talent in this Zoom conference today, and I'm very excited. So I want to get us started off with discussing why is urban farming important, and maybe to get us started, what is urban farming? Go ahead, Herb. We want to hear from you.
See, I shouldn't have unmuted first. I should have just stayed muted. That's why is it important, or what is it? Let's say start with what is it. So urban farming is farming within the boundaries of an urban setting. Simplified, that is the definition. So not rural farming. And why it's important. So it's important on many levels. One, so that people in the community have access to locally grown, healthy produce. I mean, that's one level of it. Another level of it, which our organization kind of likes to focus on, is the reconnecting people to the healing power of nature. So it's the process of growing, and it's the process of reconnecting with the land that becomes our primary focus, where the nutrition and the benefits of the produce become somewhat secondary. I mean, it's all a part of the complete package, but our focus is really on the spiritual level of reconnecting to the process of growing your own food. So that's why we see it as important to support and to continue to implement in our community.
Anybody have anything they want to add to that?
Um, in addition to what Herb said, urban farming is really important to students. Connecting to nature makes them really happy, but also the ability to grow their own food kind of helps them to control their future. And having better and nutritious food allows them to be healthier and to be better students. And so I want to encourage these students to kind of be the next generation of environmental stewards. And to do that, urban farming is required.
Robin, I see you're nodding your head. You work a lot with the youth. Tell me about what urban farming means to the kids.
Yeah. So urban farming for the youth, from what I've seen, has done amazing work. We go into the work thinking that, like, we're just going to teach these kids a certain number of things, but we open up so many other doors that we couldn't even see, and urban farming just leaves space for kids to go somewhere and not worry about a lot of life stresses going on. It helps them unwind. It helps them think clearly. What we did on our farm through the summer, at least, we would have our kids come by and do daily journaling before we even start the day to kind of help them process and just kind of think through things, and that kind of just helped facilitate just like the thinking process.
That's great. I wanted to talk a little bit about food deserts, because there may be some of us in the room that don't understand what a food desert is. And if someone can help us understand what food deserts are, do they exist in Connecticut, and how does the lack of accessibility to fresh food impact community wellness?
So I'd say food deserts are USDA designated, but I'd say that those areas dealing with that designation are dealing with food apartheid. A desert is a naturally occurring ecosystem which is like fully functioning. It's not as destitute as people might think, but food apartheid is something very intentional, and I think it's a little deeper than just a desert.
So talk about the concept of food apartheid, because I think people may not understand what you're talking about. What does that look like on the ground?
Yeah, so that looks like not having a grocery store within walking distance. It looks like not having access to get to that grocery store, or money to buy food at that grocery store. It looks like corner stores filled with junk food and things that people could be used to, but it's just not really beneficial for their bodies.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
One thing that I learned and experienced with food apartheid is that it's not done by mistake. There's like policies behind it that make sure that we don't have access to these grocery stores, or businesses aren't providing this food. Even I noticed that in some of the schools that aren't provided local produce have, lesser quality of food. And so it's not something that just happens. It's something that is intentional.
Herb, do you want to add to that, or?
I would just say that I agree with both of those statements. It's very intentional. Quality of food, access to food, and even education about food and nutrition, right? I mean, that's a scarcity as well in these communities. So it's on multiple levels. But yes, definitely intentional, to a certain degree.
One of the classes I taught in the social work program, we did back in the day, it was called the Food Stamp Challenge, where we would challenge the students to live off of the amount of money that you're provided in the EBT program. And I also had my family do it, because I can't make my students do something that I won't do. And over the course of the week, my little kids were complaining because all we had was like frozen vegetables or frozen fruit, because fresh fruit and fresh vegetables were too expensive on that diet. And they were really impacted by that. And I think that must be so impactful in a whole community, that that's what they have access to, is lower quality foods and foods that don't have the same degree of nutrients.
And the other side of that is a lot of folks, you know, if they have never been exposed to those other types of foods or higher quality foods, they think that that food that they are eating and consuming is all there is, right?
Yeah.
That's what there is, you know, available to them. And I think that's where, you know, Lauren and Robert's work begins, is kind of educating those folks that this is not all we have access to. There is more out there, and we're living in a system that kind of prevents us from accessing it. But here are some tools and some strategies for you to access better quality nutrition.
Yeah. So tell me about the challenges that you have, like you're in an urban area. How do you acquire land to put garden space in? What does that look like?
That is an excellent question. I would say it's extremely difficult. There is a monopoly on the land that's available. You know, different groups, organizations, or nonprofits kind of control that land, and people have to rent it out at a cost, and it may not be managed in the way that we need it. And so it's just, from my experience, it's extremely difficult. So getting land is almost impossible. I would say I've been lucky enough to be able to partner with different organizations like the Hartford Land Bank and with the City of Hartford, and with KPSP, to be able to potentially get access to land. But it's not something that just comes along. And so if you don't have money, resources, or people in the community supporting you, you're not going to have it. And so actually land access is the most important thing, because that's where you grow your food. And even the land that we have, a lot of it is poisoned and has things that we need to do to it in order to make it healthy and viable. So it really feels like you are already behind and getting access to this food.
So I'm imagining there's like a vacant lot somewhere that somebody can imagine that, let's put a garden there. Is that how it works?
It's different ways. That's definitely an option. Usually you can go to community gardens and rent the space. Say if there's, you know, different homeowners that can use their area, you can do like container gardening in your apartment or wherever you live, but there's very limited options. And so you kind of have to work with what's available. And it definitely aligns with like the lack of housing and the high costs. It's kind of the same thing with land access. And I would say it's extremely difficult. Farmers that I work with all have the same issues of land access.
Robert or Herb, do you find that to be also the case?
Yes, I think that has been the case. What for us, you know, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've realized that the number of community gardens, there's plenty of community gardens in our city, but the majority of them are, you know, managed by groups that kind of have kept to themselves, in the sense that when you have a grassroots farmer or a grassroots educator or a grassroots organization that wants to kind of start to create another network, it hasn't been well received, right? So now, you know, we're excited that the City of Hartford and the Hartford Land Bank are offering opportunities for these farmers to acquire vacant lots, and not only acquire them for growing produce, but acquire them for ownership, right? So they're not leasing these plots; they're actually being transferred to these farmers, which is humongous, right? And you know, some of the ideas that people are putting forward are, you know, education demonstration gardens or orchards or vineyards or monoculture vacant lots where you're just growing peppers and okra, but you're working with a system of farmers who are also managing lots to help create a food system network within the community. So that's the direction that we're moving into as a collective. But yes, I will say that a huge challenge in the past few years has been accessing land without strings attached, right? Like without a lot of drama and other issues to deal with.
What's the difference between the concept of a community garden and a community farm?
I think from at least from my experience, a community garden will be spaces where, you know, each plot will be designed assigned a different family. So you know, everyone's plot is going to look different. Everyone's going to have like a different background that they bring to their plot. And with a community farm, we do production growing. This space we have is about an acre, like 1.7 acres. So there's a few beds lined up. So we do production growing. We do we're growing various produce, but a number of beds. So we are able to get out some large numbers of certain items. But and then we sell those at our farmers market for below market rate.
And how do you manage the ordinary tasks of farming in an urban environment, like composting? Where does the soil come from? How do you enrich the soil? I bet it's probably hard to drive a tractor around in the urban areas. Like, how does that all work?
I would say by first developing those relationships. So before I do anything, I walk around and see who's doing what and say, hey, I see you have this. Do you need this? Definitely trading extra produce and also implementing programs. So one thing that we have done in the past is connecting with schools and say, hey, we're going to take all your compost and we have this composter. We're working with like a local like neighborhood organization, and they're going to get the compost and we're going to make sure we have this soil. But also like working with donations. Again, KPSB provides soil, but then also really connecting with the community of farmers in Hartford. There are so many different cultures that have really great growing techniques, and it's great that we skill share. Like one thing we do is like fermented plant juice, companion planting, and really kind of supporting each other, because if we don't, we won't be successful.
Okay, I really want to know what fermented plant juice is. What is that, and what do you do with it?
Okay, so I would describe it as like a medicine smoothie or like a herbal tea for your plants. It's just basically taking some plants and like fermenting it and putting it back into the soil to like add nutrients to your plants to help them be healthier, be more fortified. Like I use it for my cucumbers, and it was really easy to prevent the rats from getting to it or any type of bugs getting into them. And so just really using that and sharing that technique with other farmers, because then they also tell me, oh, this is what I do to kind of help. I can share my seeds with you, or I have extra compost. And so I feel like doing that is really helpful, because people kind of share their adjustments of what has worked for them, and you can apply that to your own growing site.
So it sounds like there's a lot of sharing and enriching activity that happen amongst the community members that are involved with the farming and gardening efforts. Tell me about the different cultural groups or ethnic groups or immigrant groups that come together in your efforts, and how do they support and share with one another?
Yeah, so in Bridgeport, there's a large Spanish community. There's a large community of various Caribbean places. So they all come with their own expertise. They all come with a lot of knowledge and history with just working the land. So they all come with their own seeds and specific plants that they like. Like callaloo. You gotta know who to give the green ones to, who to give the red ones to. You gotta.
What does that mean? You have to explain the red ones and the green ones to me.
Yeah. So green callaloo. If I'm not mistaken, that's gonna be more on the Jamaican people side. And,
is it like a spinach callaloo?
Yes. Or amaranth, as people might know it. And then the red callaloo, if I'm not mistaken, is going to be leaning towards people from Trinidad.
Huh.
Okay, cool.
You're getting the nod from Lauren. So.
And then, a lot of people from the South in Bridgeport as well. So if we don't have collard greens and okra, then I don't think we're doing anything right.
So they bring their knowledge, their skills, and the food that is from their heart into these communities.
Yeah. Also, one thing I noticed is like we have a large refugee population, like the Karen tribe, and we have I've interacted with a lot of farmers from Jamaica and from Nepal and from Puerto Rico. And that's kind of what really helped me. But then also too, when you share like your produce and your bounty, they come back with like some cooked food for you. And so, yeah, right. And so that's really part of like developing that community. But then also, a lot of people don't see examples of food at home and from their culture at the grocery stores. So even if it's healthy stuff, they may not even have access to it at all. And I feel like it's really important to recognize that and also learn some of the cultural dishes that they make, because I really like to be able to share that with students and say, you know, you can make these different things. You can represent your culture and break bread in this way.
How do the people that come together and maybe these plot sort of gardens, like how do they communicate with one another if they're not speaking the same language? Is there a universal language of farming?
I'd say yes. I think farming may be the universal language, right? So one thing that does happen in a lot of the community gardens where they are sharing plots, that's where they, you know, these farmers of these different backgrounds come together to share experiences. And I think also at our farmers markets, right? So that's when each group or of farmers or group of farmers are coming with their produce and also sharing, like Lauren said, sharing their bounty with each other. But I think, yes, farming becomes the universal language. But at the community garden, at the farmers market, those become classrooms, right? Like they become these education experience for all of the farmers from these different backgrounds to learn and share experiences with each other. It's pretty amazing to watch, actually. Yeah.
Does someone have a story about something they've seen where it's been this amazing cultural exchange?
I don't have an amazing story, but I will say that there's a farmer named Derek who grows Scotch bonnet peppers. The seeds are directly from Jamaica. And I was actually selling some Scotch bonnet peppers that I had grown at the same farmer's market where he was. And this West Indian woman, she sent her daughter to go buy Scotch bonnet peppers, and she happened to come by my table first. So I sold them to her, whatever. So 5 minutes later, her mom comes with her, like dragging her, and she's a grown woman, and her mom is dragging her like, these are not Scotch bonnets. So she drags her daughter around to the other side of the farmer's market to Derek's table. And she's like, these are Scotch bonnets. So she brings her daughter and the other Scotch bonnets back to me. And she's like, you see, these are real. So ever since then, I've only grown Scotch bonnets that have come from seeds that I received from Derek. You know, so it's those little experiences that kind of teach you that, you know, the differences between the produce and the, you know, cultural techniques that are valuable to know as a farmer, as an urban farmer.
I think a lot of people don't think about the Welders as misplaced farmers, right? The immigrant farmers, which if you think about the history of humanity, people move from agriculture to industrial centers, and it's still happening today. So you have people coming from all over the world from agricultural environments, and they're placed in urban settings, and they are able to have a little piece of home in that little plot of land they have. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of times, even the people that aren't as engaged in some of the spaces because they may not be aware. There's so many untapped farmers around the cities. There's so much wealth of information that could be shared out, but if they don't know about it, or if they're not thinking agriculturally, then they're just kind of sitting dormant.
Yeah, it's almost like a resource that doesn't get tapped and may get lost.
Yeah,
I
would say
of information. Go ahead, Lauren.
I would just say that I've been amazed in some of the ways urban farmers have had so much yield in a small space. Just even checking with some of like the Nepalese farmers and like how they create these like different levels of growing stuff and vertical gardens and just growing, pounds and pounds of food. I feel like, being able to increase your yields in farming is so important, especially in smaller and other places. Also foraging and just being able to understand, what are the best species of fruit or vegetable that you want to grow to be able to have enough food to eat is, I've noticed, is really important.
How do they do vertical farming?
Oh, it's super cool. So I've seen many different designs. I've seen like when they have like kind of a cage and they have like plants growing on the inside, on the outside. I've seen where some farmers use like just branches and sticks and they create kind of like this shape and then it kind of continues just to go on like build on itself. So they have this basic shape and then it has like these levels and they have like squashes growing out through them and like potatoes on the bottom and just they basically take like they take and create this really intricate trellises over just like items that they find, and it's pretty amazing. They kind of like little houses, and at the end of the season they just take it down and are able just to harvest all of their food. So I'm very thankful some of the people who show me those different architectures that you can use depending on the plant that you need to grow.
That sounds amazing. And I wonder if there would be some people in the Reading area that might be interested to coming and tour the gardening that's happening in these urban spaces, because, you know, it's fascinating to see. And there's probably lots of species and vegetables and things that, you know, some of us may not be so familiar with that we can learn about as well. So that's really exciting. So let's talk about the kids. How do we get the kids involved? What sort of programs are you guys doing with young people?
Yeah, you want to go, Herb? All right. So the programs that we have with GVI with young people, our main I guess course, summer employment program. It's an 8-week program where we teach the high school students about farming, daily tasks, as well as food justice. We touch on some social justice things. We've done a number of workshops. We screen printed T-shirts this year. We've done a number of things. We've done some informational field trips through this program, and then what we've done in the past is after the summer, then we transition into the school year, and that would look like a food leader advisory group, and that's any youth that's been a part of the program. They they can come to these meetings and help influence how the program is going to be designed for the next year. And then something else that we have as well for school year year-round programming is a fellowship program, in which every youth involved is going to be working on their own community impact project, and how they want to make a change in the Bridgeport food system specifically.
I agree with Lauren. Herb, what are you guys doing with young people at your garden?
I was just going to say, we have an easy answer to that question. We call Lauren. So what we do is that we're more so of a connector, right? So we have a community group or a school that reaches out and says they wants to learn about gardening education. Then we reach out to Lauren or another gardener or farmer in the area to work with the kid. If they want to learn more about composting, we'll reach out to one of our community partners like Blue Earth Compost and have them come down and do lessons with the kids. So if it's beekeeping or if it's maple syrup or if it's hydroponics, then we find the educator, connect them to the community group and kind of give them the setting and the classroom to do the education programming.
So one thing I feel like is really important about teaching kids about agriculture is it needs to be informed by what they want to do. So before I do anything, I always ask the kids, what do you want to learn? What do you want to do? And how do you want to do it? And that's kind of what informed my 10 basic units for my Guys Guides program. And so I usually provide programs to schools and organizations and partnerships either in 4 8-week sessions. And I do all ages. So in the summer, I usually do like youth and families programming, where I show kids how to grow their own food, but focus on growing it as a family. I also have this awesome like Seed to Salad program where kids who are in pre-K learn how to grow a salad. Even right now, I'm doing as a kind of enrichment program for Gaia's Guides in our tree tending unit, we're doing maple tree magic. So we're talking to the kids about maple tree tapping, how to love trees, how to identify and respect them. And it's really important to understand some of those practices that came from the indigenous peoples And also, just Guys Guides itself is just a program that I bring to various schools and really kind of connect with the teachers to make sure it's based upon, next generation science standards. So those teachers can take a break, but then also the students are getting that science requirement in school and really support them to have garden support. So right now, one of the schools I've been working at for about 7 years, we work with Herb to make sure they have a garden. They have a really cool composter. And also a lot of the students' families are really skilled in farming and they know about it. And so it really helps to increase parent engagement, and the schools love that. And also one thing is like kids love to sing and dance and to laugh and have fun. And that's really a big part of edutainment is having them kind of lead the instruction and knowing that I'll be a guide to let them know that's okay, it's safe, they're not going to get hurt, they're just going to have fun. I actually just recently did a program with OPP when I was talking about like Black businesses and working with high school students to tell them about value added products and to show them that the things that you like to do, you can tie that back to farming. Like if you like making clothes, you can find a way to see how that connects to you. And so the students are really seeing that, yes, I can be involved with agriculture. I just didn't realize what that connection was in my life. And I would also say that everything's kind of based upon principles of mindfulness. So really making sure that we're intentional what we're doing and that the kids know what's happening, that I set the pace and I let them know that, we're there for them. And it's important for them to respect themselves by respecting nature. And I always make sure that I collect their feedback, doesn't matter any age, and everything that they say needs to be incorporated in my lessons and what I'm teaching them.
I could see why you call Lauren Herb. That's exciting because really by tying all those life lessons and cultural history to farming, it's such an easy fit. Science and history and math, all those things are all gardening and farming. You need all that education to be a farmer, and being a farmer helps you employ all that education.
Oh, and I forgot one thing. Also really important to include puppets. So I have puppets and like original stories that represent the kids' experiences. They need to see themselves in the and how we connect with nature and see examples of people who look like them.
I love the puppets. I wish you had the puppets.
Do you want to see one?
Yeah. Doesn't everybody
Hold on
want to see? All right. You go get the puppets. I'm going to go on to my next question.
Real quick. Real quick.
What are some of the? Go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. I just wanted to add that we are also able to offer college credits for participating in the summer employment program. We've been able to build a bridge with Housatonic, and it's been a great partnership that we're looking to continue.
That's great. That's good for me to know. Oh, she's getting ready.
I don't know if you can see her, but she's a humongous bee. It was created by an artist. Her name is Carol Padberg.
Oh yeah.
Hello.
Oh,
hello, Bobby. Buzz. So yeah, this is a humongous bee. And it also helps the kids not be afraid of bees, but also to help them understand the actual anatomy of a bee. And so when they see it in real life, they're like, oh, I know this, and that's the wing and all that stuff. Right. And so that's important for them to see it.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that. We have a question from the audience, and it says, is it helpful for communities outside of urban areas like Reading, or for individuals to get involved and support urban farming? Basically, how can people in Reading and the surrounding communities be helpful to urban farmers?
Yeah, just get plugged in. I guess see what areas are local to you, see what kind of urban farming initiatives are going on. See there's plenty of people doing amazing work, and I'm sure they'd love some extra hands, donations if that's what they're willing to do. Yeah, there's plenty of ways to get tapped in.
Herb, any ideas?
Yeah, I would say identify a network or a group that is, close to you or where you'd like to kind of focus your support, and see what they need. I mean, they may need hands, weeding. They may need maybe some grant writing support, or they may need some, it could be any wide range of support that this group may need to, continue with their efforts. So identify a group, reach out, and just ask them how you can help.
So like if we, for example, have lawyers involved in our community and they wanted to help out, they may be able to say, I have legal skills. Is there any sort of, legal issues that you may need help with? Because you guys deal with a lot of land contracts and all that kind of stuff, I'm guessing.
For sure.
Lauren, did you have something else?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I agree with what everyone said. One thing is important is like, if you guys have surplus, if you're willing to trade, definitely skill shares and, having farmers and individuals come to see us, but also inviting us to your space as well. Really would like to learn the techniques that you guys are using, how you're cultivating your soil, but also sharing the resources that you have and where you get it from. That is really important because we aren't always tapped into those networks. There's a lot of gatekeeping and racism that affects our ability to do that. And so having people stand up first in that way is very crucial.
So I think this moves us to another question, which is what are some of the biggest challenges you guys find in urban farming? Like what are some of the places that you keep running against a wall, or every year, what do you come up against that is a challenge for you? Go ahead, Herb.
Robert and Lauren both grabbed their chin at the same time. And like,
I know, like they're thinking.
They're like, where do I begin, right? I would say, and Lauren, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd say the largest challenge that we face is trying to get funders, supporters, officials to recognize that supporting grassroots efforts from community members to take care of themselves is a viable, important way of spending resources. I think it is very easy for insurance companies and other funders and foundations to give a chunk of money to the organization or the entity that appears to have the most capacity or appears to be doing the most work. It's an easy, win-win. That organization gets a chunk of change and the foundation gets their pictures taken with the community folks. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, the rubber rarely meets the road. And then you have a ton of people, grassroots, community driven, focused on taking care of their community. And when they need resources, they don't have access to them. And this has been the challenge that we've been trying to overcome in Hartford over the last 4 or 5 years that I've been kind of doing this. And I'm sure folks have been doing it longer than that. But to me, that's probably one of the largest challenges that I've faced since starting.
And what kind of resources, when you say resources, obviously there's funding. Are there other resources that you're having trouble having access to?
So it's also the implementation and the planning resources, right? So like, well, the planning resources, the planning resources and the research dollars and the organizing funding, that is also part of the resources that we haven't had access to.
Lauren, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Herb is completely right. And like some of the basic things is like soil, like, using community gardens in places that aren't properly managed and you don't have access to the water and soil that you paid for, and having to find other avenues to get it is like very difficult to your growing. But then also just lack of information and just a cutoff of our communities that's kind of set up by organizations that are poverty pimping and getting money by taking ownership of the work that we're doing and not getting properly compensated for. Also, just gonna throw it out there, racism, that's a big thing. Like I'm definitely dodging police as I'm walking through the streets holding like a shovel looking crazy. And so that is really important. Also like animals, rats, raccoons, groundhogs, those are some basic things, and really understanding that the animals living in rural areas are different than the ones here. But then also it's really interesting learning the little micro ecosystems that are in Hartford, they kind of aren't the same all throughout the city. So like finding plants that are native to Hartford and what grows best is important. And also just, yeah, also just lack of basic support. And we do have a community, but everyone is always too busy focusing on growing and farming. So it gets to a point where we just need extra help, and we need people looking out for our safety and for our well-being as we're growing.
What does that mean, the safety and well-being while you're growing? What do you mean by that?
So for example, just making sure that like the soil or the grounds that we're using is safe. You know, sometimes things still have poison in it and I don't know, or even like places that you may have land, maybe, you know, it's not, how the best way to put this, maybe some of like I'll give you guys an example. Like I had a bunch of cats at one of my gardens and I'm like, what are the cats doing to my plants? I don't know how to make sure that they're not poisoning it. Or actually even other people who don't really understand how farming works, you know, affecting what you're going. It's not always safe to be out, you know, in the city when it's dark at 8 p.m. to be working on your garden. And so having the community understand what you're doing. But then also just when you're doing farming, it's also just a dangerous thing. So you're building stuff, you are, you know, doing some like light construction, and you just want to make sure that you're being nice to your body. And so well-being is also like focusing on mental health and your physical health. Farming is really grueling. And so when you don't have community, it's hard to kind of take care of yourself to ensure that.
Where do you guys keep your farming tools? Like if I'm living in an apartment and I'm going down to work my garden, where do I keep my shovels and my hose and those fork things that you guys use? Where do I keep that?
Trunk.
In the trunk of my car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So look, when I living in Bridgeport, definitely definitely a lot of container gardening in backyards, and borrowing things from neighbors, and yeah, definitely a lot of stuff in the trunk though.
Herb, and you have a pretty big area that you're working with. You have proper storage facilities.
Yeah, we do at our site, but I know some of the community gardens around town too. They also have sheds and different types of systems for storing tools. I know that UConn Extension is working on a program now for tool sharing, where Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford will all have central locations for young new farmers to be able to borrow tools for their gardens. People are figuring it out, they're figuring it out. And I think back to Lauren's point is the more we connect to each other, the more resources we have to share, and the easier it becomes. So we're learning.
Yeah, like a tool library. They check out a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Any other challenges of urban farms? And you gave me a long list, but so you have, we were talking before the meeting started about what are you doing this time of year? And so Robert, you were talking about having one of those big hoop garden things.
Yeah, so on our site, the GVI, we don't have a greenhouse per se, but we have what's called a high hoop house, which is very similar, where structural wise, sure, you can think greenhouse, but it's covered with plastic, and on the sides you can roll up a certain section to let some airflow go by. So we don't, we can control, but so much, heat wise, temperature wise. But right now we're gearing up and getting some shelves ready to get a bunch of seedlings started, so that we can get that process going.
That's exciting. It's almost spring. What are some valuable lessons that you all have learned along the way, either with getting a farm started, getting land, getting the kids involved? What are some lessons that you've learned along the way?
I've learned to be open, just to be open, and as you know, as someone in this space, being an educator, I'm still learning as much as they are. So you know, even while I'm working, I'm just like picking up little things. A lot of farming is very relative to life. You know, if you think critically enough, I call myself a compost thinker because it takes me you know, it takes me some time to break down you know, a meeting or a talk or something. So you know, if you look at most things in farming, and you know, you take a look at your life, you know, you'll find some similarities for sure.
One thing I definitely learned is to always like ask for feedback, because people really are good at sharing what they know, and they're open to kind of bring those skills to you. And then one thing I also realized, it's like okay to ask. So like for me, I don't have access to a greenhouse, but I noticed that like some of the schools I work with have extra space. So I'm like, hey, can I use this? Or how can we work together to meet a shared goal? I also learned that if you figure out what people's goals are and align that to your own, then everyone can kind of be successful, and they're more willing to help you, and that just builds community.
Yeah, so learn a few things. I think, you know, just to echo Robert, is like you never stop learning, right? So that's one thing, is like it's always something new. But one thing that I've learned about myself throughout this process is I really like giving away produce. When you start just growing and donating and giving produce away, I don't know, it's a whole different experience, and it becomes harder to go back to, you know, trying to create a business model or a sustainable, you know, production, you know, farming enterprise for myself. You know, I've really gotten to a place where donating produce is kind of makes it all worth it for me.
Mm. So tell me, are there any urban beekeeping operations going on in either Bridgeport or Hartford? And what is that like? And where do they go to eat, the bees? Where do the bees go to eat?
So in Bridgeport, we did have some bees, but if they had gone on,
You
but
lost your hive?
we lost our hive. But we had someone that would come in and do that work for us.
So in Hartford, we have 5 hives at our site. I know Knox Parks has hives at their site as well. We actually manage our hives, and we're in Keeney Park, which is 693 acres, and then there's another nature preserve attached to it. So they, you know, they feed primarily in the garden on the flowers, but then they have, you know, acres and acres to feed as well. And we'll do a few workshops throughout the season, and then we'll harvest the honey and sell the honey at the farmers markets.
I can imagine the kids must be amazed by that process.
There's one person I'd like to shout out that's not here. Her name is Carol Padberg. She's like an educator at University of Hartford, and also an artist. And she owns she has like a local homestead at our house that she has beekeeping. And we really work together to make sure the kids are exposed to that. It's right in my neighborhood. And so I just feel like something like Nook Farmhouse and other locations where people live of raising bees is really important as we try to kind of build like a pollinator pathway in Hartford.
That's exciting. Is there any extensive hydroponic gardening going on in any of the cities?
Yeah, there's some people, there's a few people actually doing some work with hydroponics in Bridgeport. I can't think of their organizations right now.
And do they set them up on top of buildings, in buildings, outside? Where do they get set up?
Yeah, so there's one business that will set it up at your home, and then there's another one. I believe they have like an indoor site where they do growing.
And Herb, you're doing hydroponics where you guys are?
So we partner with a group called Level International, and they provide different scale hydroponic kits for home growers. So you have a 5-gallon bucket, You have a 27-gallon bucket, and then you have a victory garden, which is kind of this larger structure where you can grow hydroponic lettuce. And so they are doing it on the urban farming side. There are a number of schools in the Hartford area that also have kind of commercial, semi-commercial hydroponic systems as well. So they're in the schools, they're in the community gardens. They're scattered pretty well throughout the community, which is a good thing.
That's amazing. And so the kids can just watch their salad grow in front of them.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
that's
have a system that is being installed at Milner School in Hartford, who also has a food pantry and who also will have a garden. So they'll be able to grow in their school garden, grow in their hydroponic system, harvest that produce, and then also bring it to their food pantry so that the kids can take that produce home as well, which will be pretty cool.
That's exciting. And tell me about composting. What's Blue Earth Composting and what are they doing?
So they're a home composting pickup service. They started off locally, West Hartford, but now they're all over the state. They're doing tremendously well right now. But whenever we need them to come in and do a workshop or some sort of class on composting, they will do that as well. But their primary focus is home compost pickup.
That's an interesting model because they take a waste from somebody's home and then turn it into gold for farms.
Yeah, and each at the end of, or the beginning of each season, they give their customers back, completely processed compost for their gardens or their plants or whatever the case may be. It's a very cool model.
Yeah, that's great. What is, if you were to send a message to people in more rural or suburban communities about urban farming, what do you think they would really, what's the takeaway message you'd like to leave with them?
I would say, well, one, we're all farmers, and let's kind of reach our hands across like our different areas and be able to connect and create a larger network. I know that there are some things that they could get support with and vice versa. And so feel free to reach out to us and kind of see how we can grow together.
Yeah, I think, to echo Lauren, I think building that bridge and, really coming together as farmers and, they have issues that we might not be dealing with and vice versa. We can all still help each other and make the network better. They might have a surplus of things that we might need, and we might have space that they might need.
I would say that urban farming is not only growing vegetables, but it's growing people and it's growing communities. And it's growing cultures, right? So all that is happening through this urban farming movement. So not just growing vegetables. I mean, we're growing a generation of folks through this movement.
That's fantastic. I'm really moved by the work that you all are doing in the communities, and it's valuable on so many levels because you're feeding their bellies, but you're feeding their souls and feeding their hearts. And to hear Herb talk about just wanting to share his produce is, it shows that that you're growing love in the communities that you're working in, and that's really amazing, and it's just so nice to hear. And I appreciate you guys coming here. Is there contact information or websites or anything that you guys can share with me that I can share with the community when this wraps up?
Yeah.
And is there a place where if somebody wanted to come see the work you're doing, is there some place that we can direct people to go to if they wanted to take a trip out this summer and go see what you guys are up to? Where would they go? Herb, how do they come see you?
Me and Robert are playing tag with the mute button. It's so funny. So we're in Hartford. I'll drop the information in the chat for folks. Our website is keeneyparksustainability.org. And we are located in Keeney Park in Hartford. And I'll drop the contact information in the chat for folks.
Okay.
Yeah, so in Bridgeport, we're at 1469 Reservoir Ave in Bridgeport. And yeah, you guys can check out gogvi.org to get some more information on all that we do over there. And I can also drop my contact info.
Awesome. Lauren, you want to give a little plug about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I
'Cause
have
we
many.
might want you to come out with your big B and come to our schools.
Yes, done. So I have many growing sites throughout the city. So at like Free Center, at various schools that I manage, and still working to kind of tie up the loose ends to get my own land. And so I can kind of show them all the different community garden spaces and growing sites that I have throughout Hartford. But then I also support new clients that want to do that. And I also work with Hartford Public Schools to help support one of their sites. And so what I'll do is, my website isn't complete yet, but I do have an email address that I can put in there, and also my Instagram if you want to see more examples of the work that I do.
I don't see any other questions from the audience. I just wanted to really send such a warm thank you to all of you to spend your evening with us. I'm just really impressed by what everyone's doing in the community, and I hope that we can build some bridges between us rural folk and the farmers that are across the state. So Farmers Unite. Thank you very much for all your time, and I'm going to turn it back over to Elaine.
I just want to thank you, Sharon, for bringing us all together, and Herb and Robert and Lauren. Thank you for being here, for sharing your stories and your energy. It's been wonderful to hear all about urban farming. So thank you.